In a world of high stakes and high rewards, one man's ambition would lead to one of the most shocking financial deceptions of the 21st century. His name is Allen Stanford. Stanford, a Texas-born financier, rose from a modest gym owner in Waco to a knighted billionaire in Antigua. He lived a life many could only dream of, surrounded by wealth and luxury. But beneath the glitz and glamour, a dark secret was lurking. Stanford was playing a dangerous game, one that promised returns too good to be true. Welcome to Profit Predators Business Scams Unveiled, where the glossy facade of entrepreneurship meets its shadowy counterpart. In this series, we dive deep into the world of white-collar crime, unraveling the stories of ambition turned deception. From the boardrooms to the courtroom, we expose the mechanisms and minds behind the most notorious business scams. These are tales of greed, betrayal, and the pursuit of wealth at any cost. Stay with us as we reveal the true cost of these crimes, not just in dollars, but in trust and human impact. Your journey into the darker side of business starts now. Allen Stanford came from a simple background in Mexia, Texas. By the early 1950s, Mexia had a population of 6,618 residents and was a commercial crossroads for area farmers due to the Trinity and Brazos Valley Railway track built between Hillsborough and Houston. Stanford was born on the 24th of March, 1950, to a family with a modest income. His father, James Stanford, was the mayor of Mexia and financial advisor. His mother, Sammy Nacon, was a nurse. After his parents separated in 1959, Stanford and his brother lived with their mother. Stanford finished high school at Eastern Hills High School in Fort Worth, Texas. In 1974, he completed his studies at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, earning a BA degree in finance. Stanford aimed to use his education to address what seemed like a clear need in Texas. Stanford wanted to be among the first to set up health clubs and gyms with the latest and best equipment, like Nautilus machines, and offer all the essential tools for fitness enthusiasts in one place. Stanford was friendly to customers, but if he thought someone was beneath him, like his employees, he made sure not to waste his efforts and manners on them. He liked rich people and didn't want to associate with anyone who was common or unable to help him financially. Even if it meant a lot of people leaving, he didn't seem to mind. The only time he seemed to care about his hired help was with a young, attractive woman named Susan, whom he had recently hired at one of his locations. They got married in September of 1975 and later had a son. Susan added to his reputation as someone influential and successful due to her youth and beauty. The success had its limits, though. In the mid-1980s, the oil-filled bubble burst when the price of a barrel of crude oil plummeted to $14.44 in 1986. This was a significant drop from $26.92 per barrel in the previous year, 1985. This set off a chain reaction that completely affected Allen Stanford's ventures in the health club industry. His businesses struggled to make a profit because he spent extravagantly on luxurious modes of transportation. With around $13 million in debt, he found himself in a tough situation. To deal with it, he filed for bankruptcy and shut down every location. The next chapter in Allen Stanford's life marked the start of a repeating cycle. Following a setback, he decided to strategically step back. With no money and starting from scratch, he chose the present moment to reinvent himself. The former mogul, who used to travel extensively, now spent his days doing tough physical work and making deliveries in his pickup truck. This is when he started developing the Montserrat Plan. Making use of the opportunity presented by the same circumstances that led to the closure of his health clubs, he took advantage of the buyer's market to acquire properties at prices significantly below their actual values. He seized the opportunity created by the same situation that shut down his health clubs. Using the buyer's market, he bought properties at prices much lower than their actual values. He used the money in his father's company to purchase these properties. The reward required some patience, but when the economy bounced back, the father and son team sold portions of the land for substantial profits on their investment. This, at least partially, provided funding for the Montserrat plan. After he started making money from properties, Stanford chose to open a bank on the small Caribbean island of Montserrat. Tax havens for investors have existed since as early as the 1920s and are conveniently located worldwide. While some are considered more reputable than others, in the 1980s the British-ruled Montserrat had a reputation for questionable dealings. Even back then, this island had an extremely high ratio of banks to people. Before online banking became popular, there were less conventional forms of banking on this island. Some banks had lobbies and vaults, typical of the profession, while others were simply an address or a booth at a local bar. Wearing a neat mustache and a suit, Stanford had transformed himself for his new profession. Now he worked as a financial advisor in a tax haven. But Stanford not only changed his new persona, he also adjusted other things. According to his newly crafted history, his bank, Guardian International Bank, was supposedly established in the 1930s by his grandfather, named Lotus. Stanford started thinking about the kind of clients he wanted. People who were desperate and those less familiar with the financial world were more inclined to seek help from someone in the islands than risk losing their family wealth in countries with unstable governments. At that time, the struggling countries were mostly in South America. Newspaper ads were placed to promote the assistance that Guardian International Bank could offer to affluent citizens of Venezuela and similar nations. Sometimes the ads were simple and looked like regular bank ads. However, Stanford couldn't resist adding a beautiful woman to some ads. But as a customer, why take a risk with your money when things are so unstable? Well, as a responsible and respected institution that had been around since the 1930s, they had honed their skills over the years, resulting in slightly higher returns than most banks. They were just that good. Of course, the only small issue was that it was all a well-crafted deception. They operated a pyramid scheme where the money from initial investors was invested and grew, but ultimately went back to the creator of the scheme. The next group that invested had some of their money directed to the first group, making it appear like they were getting a return, while the rest went to the schemer. The cycle goes on until eventually you run out of incoming money. In this situation, every possible cent went into Stanford's pockets. However, not everything that shines is valuable. While Stanford was gaining experience in the financial sector of a tax haven, changes were happening to Montserrat's banking laws. Scotland Yard and the FBI were looking into various banks and financial institutions suspected of engaging in shady dealings or illegal businesses. Many licenses were revoked, including Guardian's, as it was an offshore bank without backing from a regulatory body like the FDIC. Most of the initial investors in Guardian National Bank were unlucky. The money disappeared, and along with it, all the founders simply vanished. Stanford found himself starting over in many ways. However, this time he had a bit more money and a better understanding of what he needed to say to lure clients. Montserrat could no longer provide what Stanford was looking for. He was identified as a potential fraud, and there was no opportunity for profit. It was time to leave before upset investors could catch up. Try again, maybe. So what was his plan? What would he do next? In 1991, John Stanford decided to relocate to Antigua, bringing along one of his most valuable employees. Stanford had reached out to an old classmate from Baylor, James Jim Davis, for assistance with day-to-day tasks. Davis quickly climbed the ranks at Stanford's small financial institution in Montserrat and became a kind of right-hand man. In fact, he was involved in every questionable deal and detail of Stanford's life. One of the most significant lessons Stanford learned was the importance of building connections with everyone, whether they could definitely help you progress or you were still uncertain. Gone were the days of only associating with the wealthy and famous. It turned out that this was a magical way to open doors and minds to your way of thinking. Upon arriving in Antigua, he acquired most of the land around the airport and established Stanford Financial International, initiating the same advertising campaign he had used previously. Simultaneously, the new company significantly lowered the unemployment rate in the country, making it one of the major employers. Consequently, the Antiguan government started recognizing him as an asset to the country. At this juncture, Stanford proudly held citizenship in both the United States and Antigua. As a result, deception ran deep and was widespread in the government and police force of Antigua. This suited Stanford well, given his knack for negotiation and deal-making. The more underhanded the deals involving blackmail and secret conspiracies, the more they aligned with his objectives. The Antiguan benefactor had established his own firm. It was straightforward. They wouldn't scrutinize his financial dealings too closely. As a gesture of gratitude, Stanford International would lend the government $87 million. And they all agreed. In a place like this, the financier was beyond the law, where money could buy immunity from any criminal acts. The strategy that began in Montserrat showed promise, and if the authorities hadn't intervened, it could have lasted for years. However, the sophistication of what he established in Antigua was even more successful. With money pouring in, Stanford expanded to have actual offices in Panama, Venezuela, and Peru. But with this newfound success came a sense of ease and comfort. He felt he had it made. What could go wrong? This was when Stanford made a tactical error by focusing his attention on the United States. In 1995, Stanford returned to Texas. He leased buildings and recruited financial advisors from major companies, a deliberate move knowing that, like mechanics or hairdressers, people are hesitant to try someone new when it comes to money. People prefer a familiar face. By hiring knowledgeable and reputable staff, his credibility and the apparent legitimacy of his operation were less likely to be questioned. With a sufficient number of intermediaries between himself and the public, Stanford initiated his American advertising campaign. The plan was to market the same strategy as a certificate of deposit or CD program. To understand, think of a certificate of deposit as a special account at your bank. When you open a CD, you start with an initial lump sum, also called the principal. The deal is that you won't make any withdrawals for a set period. If you need to take out some money in an emergency, it comes with a cost, a penalty. This encourages customers to keep the money untouched. During that time, your money earns interest. After the specified period, you return your certificate with the details to the holder and claim your principal plus the interest. Although the interest percentage is typically low, it's a secure choice for those whose money would otherwise be sitting and earning little to no interest. He replicated his advertising campaign, becoming a major employer and catching the Antiguan government's attention. As a citizen of both the United States and Antigua, Stanford manipulated the lax government to his advantage. He continued his dubious practices, creating slush funds, utilizing tax havens, and lending money to himself. As his success grew, Stanford expanded to Panama, Venezuela, and Peru. He even sponsored high-profile cricket games to display his wealth. Knighted by the Antiguan government in 2006, Stanford enjoyed positive publicity. However, his questionable practices caught the attention of global authorities. In 2009, the SEC exposed Stanford's fraudulent CD scheme. Clients woke up to find Stanford International at a crime scene, and the man they trusted was a fraud. Forensic accountants struggled to trace the missing funds. Stanford claimed innocence, but clients, panicking, sought to withdraw their money. Authorities compiled evidence revealing Stanford's lies. The SEC arrested Stanford on charges of fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice in June 2009. Despite pleading not guilty, his defense team employed delaying tactics, citing health issues. Eventually, Stanford faced trial, enduring 7 weeks of testimonies. On the 6th of March 2012, he was found guilty on 13 counts, receiving a 110-year prison sentence. The civil case ordered him to pay back $6.7 billion and a $5.9 billion fine. Stanford's elaborate schemes crumbled. leaving 30,000 victims defrauded of their savings, dreams, and trust. His legacy is one of deceit, greed, and a life built on others' suffering. Thank you for joining us on Profit Predators: Business Scams Unveiled. Today's journey through the intricate webs of deceit and ambition reminds us of the price of unbridled greed. As we conclude, remember, awareness and integrity are our best defenses in a world where profit can often precede principle. For more insights and stories that peel back the layers of the business world's darker side, subscribe and stay tuned. Together, we'll continue to share stories that shock and shape our marketplaces. Until next time, stay informed and always question the integrity behind the profits.